School psychology is a field that applies principles of educational psychology, developmental psychology, clinical psychology, community psychology, and applied behavior analysis to meet children's and adolescents' behavioral health and learning needs in a collaborative manner with educators and parents. School psychologists are educated in psychology, child and adolescent development, child and adolescent psychopathology, education, family and parenting practices, learning theories, and personality theories. They are knowledgeable about effective instruction and effective schools. They are trained to carry out psychological testing and psychoeducational assessment, counseling, and consultation, and in the ethical, legal and administrative codes of their profession. Historical foundations. School psychology dates back to the beginning of American psychology in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The field is tied to both functional and clinical psychology. School psychology actually came out of functional psychology. School psychologists were interested in childhood behaviors, learning processes, and dysfunction with life or in the brain itself. They wanted to understand the causes of the behaviors and their effects on learning. In addition to its origins in functional psychology, school psychology is also the earliest example of clinical psychology, beginning around 1890. While both clinical and school psychologists wanted to help improve the lives of children, they approached it in different ways. School psychologists were concerned with school learning and childhood behavioral problems, which largely contrasts the mental health focus of clinical psychologists. Another significant event in the foundation of school psychology as it is today was the Thayer Conference. The Thayer Conference was first held in August 1954 in West Point, New York in Hotel Thayer. The 9-day-long conference was conducted by the American Psychological Association. The purpose of the conference was to develop a position on the roles, functions, and necessary training and credentialing of a school psychologist. At the conference, 48 participants that represented practitioners and trainers of school psychologists discussed the roles and functions of a school psychologist and the most appropriate way to train them. At the time of the Thayer Conference, school psychology was still a very young profession with only about 1,000 school psychology practitioners. One of the goals of the Thayer Conference was to define school psychologists. The agreed-upon definition stated that school psychologists were psychologists who specialize in education and have specific knowledge of assessment and learning of all children. School psychologists use this knowledge to assist school personnel in enriching the lives of all children. This knowledge is also used to help identify and work with children with exceptional needs. It was discussed that a school psychologist must be able to assess and develop plans for children considered to be at risk. A school psychologist is also expected to better the lives of all children in the school. Therefore, it was determined that school psychologists should be advisors in the planning and implementation of school curriculum. Participants at the conference felt that since school psychology is a specialty, individuals in the field should have completed a 2-year graduate training program or a 4-year doctoral program. Participants felt that states should be encouraged to establish certification standards to ensure proper training. It was also decided that a practicum experience be required to help facilitate experiential knowledge within the field. The Thayer Conference is one of the most significant events in the history of school psychology because it was there that the field was initially shaped into what it is today. Before the Thayer Conference defined school psychology, practitioners used 75 different professional titles. By providing one title and a definition, the conference helped to get school psychologists recognized nationally. Since a consensus was reached regarding the standards of training and major functions of a school psychologist, the public can now be assured that all school psychologists are receiving adequate information and training to become a practitioner. It is essential that school psychologists meet the same qualifications and receive appropriate training nationwide. These essential standards were first addressed at the Thayer Conference. At the Thayer Conference, some participants felt that in order to hold the title of a school psychologist, an individual must have earned a doctoral degree. That is an issue that is still debated today and is the primary difference between the National Association of School Psychologists and the American Psychological Association. APA only recognizes doctoral degrees, whereas NASP approves school psychology specialist and doctoral programs that meet their standards. Social reform in the early 1900s. The late 19th century marked the era of social reforms directed at children. It was due to these social reforms that the need for school psychologists emerged. These social reforms included compulsory schooling, juvenile courts, child labor laws, as well as a growth of institutions serving children. Society was starting to change the meaning of children from an economic source of labor to a psychological source of love and affection. Historian Thomas Fagan argues that the preeminent force behind the need for school psychology was compulsory schooling laws. Prior to the compulsory schooling law, only 20% of school-aged children completed elementary school and only 8% completed high school. Due to the compulsory schooling laws, there was an influx of students with mental and physical defects who were required by law to be in school. There needed to be an alternative method of teaching for these different children. Between 1910 and 1914, schools in both rural and urban areas created small special education classrooms for these children. From the emergence of special education classrooms came the need for experts to help assist in the process of child selection for special education. Thus, school psychology was founded. Important contributors to the founding. Leitner Whitmer has been acknowledged as the founder of school psychology. Whitmer was a student of both Wilhelm Wundt and James McKeen Cattell. While Wundt believed that psychology should deal with the average or typical performance, Cattell's teachings emphasized individual differences. Whitmer followed Cattell's teachings and focused on learning about each individual child's needs. Whitmer opened the first psychological and child guidance clinic in 1896 at the University of Pennsylvania. Whitmer's goal was to prepare psychologists to help educators solve children's learning problems, specifically those with individual differences. Whitmer became an advocate for these special children. He was not focused on their deficits per se, but rather helping them overcome them, by looking at the individual's positive progress rather than all they still could not achieve. Whitmer stated that his clinic helped to discover mental and moral defects and to treat the child in such a way that these defects may be overcome or rendered harmless through the development of other mental and moral traits. He strongly believed that active clinical interventions could help to improve the lives of the individual children. Since Whitmer saw much success through his clinic, he saw the need for more experts to help to these individuals. Whitmer argued for special training for the experts working with exceptional children in special educational classrooms. He called for a new profession which will be exercised more particularly in connection with educational problems, but for which the training of the psychologist will be a prerequisite. As Whitmer believed in the appropriate training of these school psychologists, he also stressed the importance of appropriate and accurate testing of these special children. The IQ testing movement was sweeping through the world of education after its creation in 1905. However, the IQ test negatively influenced special education. The IQ test creators, Lewis Terman and Henry Goddard, held a nativist view of intelligence, believing that intelligence was inherited and difficult if not impossible to modify in any meaningful way through education. These notions were often used as a basis for excluding children with disabilities from the public schools. Whitmer argued against the standard pencil and paper IQ and Binet-type tests in order to help select children for special education. Whitmer's child selection process included observations and having children perform certain mental tasks. Granville. Stanley Hall. Another important figure to the origin of school psychology was Granville Stanley Hall. Rather than looking at the individual child as Whitmer did, Hall focused more on the administrators, teachers and parents of exceptional children. He felt that psychology could make a contribution to the administrator system level of the application of school psychology. Hall created the child study movement, which helped to invent the concept of the normal child. Through Hall's child study, he helped to work out the mappings of child development and focused on the nature and nurture debate of an individual's deficit. Hall's main focus of the movement was still the exceptional child, despite the fact that he worked with atypical children. Arnold Gessel. Bridging the gap between the child study movement, clinical psychology and special education, Arnold Gessel was the first person in the United States to officially hold the title of school psychologist. Arnold Gessel. He successfully combined psychology and education by evaluating children and making recommendations for special teaching. Arnold Gessel paved the way for future school psychologists. Gertrude Hildreth. Gertrude Hildreth was a psychologist with the Lincoln School at Teachers College, Columbia, then at Brooklyn College in New York. The book discussed applying the science of psychology to address the perceived problems in schools. The main focus of the book was on applied educational psychology to improve learning outcomes. Hildreth listed 11 problems that can be solved by applying psychological techniques, including instructional problems in the classroom, assessment of achievement, interpretation of test results, instructional groupings of students for optimal outcomes, vocational guidance, curriculum development, and investigations of exceptional pupils. Hildreth emphasized the importance of collaboration with parents and teachers. She is also known for her development of the Metropolitan Readiness Tests and for her contribution to the Metropolitan Achievement Test. In 1933 and 1939, Hildreth published a bibliography of mental tests and rating scales encompassing a 50-year time period and over 4,000 titles. She wrote approximately 200 articles and bulletins and had an international reputation for her work in education. USA. Unlike clinical psychology and counseling psychology, which often are doctoral-only fields, school psychology includes individuals with master's, specialist, certificate of advanced graduate studies, and doctoral degrees. In the past, a master's degree was considered the standard for practice in schools, but the National Association of School Psychologists currently recognizes the 60-credit-hour specialist degree as the most appropriate level of training needed for entry-level school-based practice. According to the NASP Research Committee, in 2004, 33% of school psychologists possessed master's degrees, 35% possessed specialist degrees, and 32% possessed doctoral degrees. A BA, or BS, is not sufficient. School psychology training programs are housed in university schools of education or departments of psychology, in specialist degree programs. The former typically results in an Ed.S. degree, while the latter results in an SSP degree. School psychology programs require courses, practica, and internships that cover the domains of data-based decision-making and accountability, consultation and collaboration, effective instruction and development of cognitive, academic skills, socialization and development of life skills, student diversity and development and learning, school and systems organization, policy development, and climate prevention, crisis intervention, and mental health, home, school, community collaboration, research and program evaluation, school psychology practice and development, and information technology standards for training and field placement. 2007. Specialist-level training typically requires 3 to 4 years of graduate training, including a 9-month internship in a school setting. Doctoral-level training programs typically require 5 to 7 years of graduate training, including a 12-month internship. which may be in a school or other setting. Doctoral level training differs from specialist level training in that it requires students to take more coursework in core psychology and professional psychology. In addition, doctoral programs typically require students to learn more advanced statistics, to be involved in research endeavors, and to complete a doctoral dissertation constituting original research. Doctoral training programs may be approved by NASP and/or accredited by the American Psychological Association. In 2007, approximately 125 programs were approved by NASP, and 58 programs were accredited by APA. Another 11 APA-accredited programs were combined programs. Canada, UK and the UK. The familiar practice and study of school psychology is more often termed educational psychology and requires a doctorate, which then enables individuals to register and subsequently practice as a licensed educational psychologist.